All right, thanks for staying with us. You're watching Standpoint. Joining me for in-depth discussion on the issue of the foreign dimension to the End Bad Governance protest, with federal government saying, look, some foreign nationals have been arrested in this regard. Let's bring in a U.S.-based lawyer and political affairs analyst, Okpe Banwo. He joins me via Zoom. Good to have you join us. We also have with us Onyekachi Adekoya, who is a defense consultant and CEO of Aquilin Intelligence. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me begin with you, Mr. Adekoya. I mean, when you look at all of this, I want to just get your thought on the fact that as you saw footages and pictures coming from that protest, and you saw, minors, as it were, waving Russian flags, what was going through your mind as you saw those pictures?
My initial assessments were that the tricolors, those look like the tricolors of the Nigerian Armed Forces in my first assessment. I then was a bit cautious to join the narrative that those were Russian colors. In the flip side, we must also appreciate the fact that Nigeria is bordered by Niger Republic, and the Niger Republic has over 54.7% Hausa population. It's understandable if you have certain sentiments begin to seep in from the north, coming south. Importantly, you probably look at the set of people who are waving those colors, not sure whether they are waving the Armed Forces color or the tricolors of the Russian Federation. This may be likely people who themselves cannot recite the pledge or the national anthem and may not even care who the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is. There's a symbolism to having juveniles fan out in the way they have done, waving those colors, being quite riotous, not even protesting. So it did seem like something was afoot, because if you look at the Northwest, Kano to be precise, and then the actions in the Northeast, in Borno State, Maiduguri to be precise, there would almost be some line suggesting some coordination in the series of events we have seen. So those who say that maybe you have some influence operators at work, maybe yes, maybe not, I've not seen enough to suggest that, but we don't believe in coincidences in our line of work. The government who claims that there's perhaps infiltration and the rest, we've not seen that, though we have seen juveniles being poured out in a systemic attritional way. So it's clear that there's a number of actors working. Yes.
You said earlier that these are minors who may not even understand what flag they were waving in the first place, and if they
Yes.
don't exactly understand what they were doing and the consequence of it, does that not perhaps speak to the fact that perhaps someone put them up to this, and that brings to bear maybe, as the foreign security agencies have spoken, the issue of a sponsor?
Very, very clearly, you must, so the problem is that I don't want to be quick to connote external influence operators because of the convoluted way we play politics. We have a lot of centrifugal forces pulling Nigeria. Nigeria has over 250 ethnic groups, so you cannot clearly say that the majority of the North wants Russia or are the ones waving Russian flag. This just smacks of some internal misplacement of priority, some mischief, definitely some coordination, but we've not seen enough to agree or accede to the suggestion that, there's some external. I just suspect mischief on the part of some local actors, if you ask me.
All right, let me bring in Mr. Akwebanwo into the conversation. Mr. Bawa, as you received the reports of, minors waving a Russian flag and then saw the footages again, what was going through your mind?
First, I have to agree with Mr. Adekoya here that I'm not so sure those are Russian flags. That was my first impression, because Russian flag is white, blue, and red. I saw some yellow in that flag they were waving. So Russia didn't jump at me, to be honest, didn't jump at me immediately. But now that I'm hearing they're saying Russian flag, because I also, like Mr. Adekoya, I don't just accept the narrative because somebody's saying it. I want to check. I don't know. I'm not going to say they are not. But Russian flag to me is that color is not exactly Russian flag in my mind.
Just sorry again to butt in, because it is not just the flag that was, they were not just waving the flag, they were also making, statements calling for a regime change as they waved those flags. So I wanted to, bring that dimension into the conversation.
Yeah, I'm getting there. You asked me a question, I'm still answering. So I don't know, but one thing is sure, whatever flag they are waving is not Nigerian flag. And that to me is evidence that there is some unseen forces at work here. They may be Nigerian, they may be foreign, I don't know. I'm going to give a benefit of the doubt to our security forces who will know better, who want to check. But one thing I'm sure, and I'm sure Mr. Adekoya will agree with me, there are external influence. When I use external now, I mean external to the organizers of the riot. The external I'm talking about could be local people who are trying to cause confusion, because there is nothing else you can be aiming for by waving any other flag. Even if it is Nigerian military flag they are waving, is that you are trying to cause problem. Why would you be waving Nigerian military flag when you are protesting? And the fact that it's being done by kids who probably cannot tell what flag they are even running, meaning somebody behind the scenes is teleguiding them, which happens in every protest. And this is where I want to say, and I want to be very emphatic, the fact that every protest always get hijacked if the security forces are not alert. Starting from 1970, I say this with all sense of seriousness. 1978, for instance, my own mother was a victim of Alima's Go riot. My mother died in that riot, right? So you would think somebody like me would say, let there not be protest again. No, protest is a right. It is for the security forces to be very alert. I didn't swear off a protest because I lost my own mother in a protest. So the right must still be maintained, while the security forces must be very, very alert to make sure anybody who is causing confusion, yes, they need to face the full extent of the law, because they are trying to subvert the will of the people who just want to protest, and at the same time use that excuse to try to enter Nigeria or to try to take advantage of us. If it is Russian flag, I expect Nigeria to make a very, very big ruckus over it. And whoever is behind it, even those children, they should be arrested. Let them tell them who gave them flags. Where did they get it from? And then expose them to the full extent of the law. So I'm with the government on this. If foreigners are involved, they shouldn't get involved in our matter. When brothers are quarreling, it's not the business of outsiders. But in all of that, I still maintain the right of the people to protest. And if they go out of line, put the full extent of the law on them. That's my take on that. When I saw that,
I will stay with you, Mr. Bao, because you're a lawyer, and I wanted to get your, the legal dimension to this. If I mean, waving Russian flags, waving the flag of a foreign country within your own country in the context of a protest. I mean, speak to us about the legal implication of that.
Waving a flag, if you are asking me legal implication, I'm not sure you're going to like my answer, but the truth is, waving a flag is an expression of freedom of expression, so to speak. You have a right to do whatever you want. It is wrong. They should not do it. Whoever is behind it, if they are trying to cause something else, they should be arrested and dealt with. But when you are saying, if you are expecting me to say that's stressing or that is whatever, I'm not going to tell you that, because
I am not expecting you to. I'm not expecting you to say anything. It's not an expectation. We are all, okay, you are a lawyer, and I just want to know what it means, under the law.
It doesn't mean anything, because it's like you pissing on the flag of Nigeria or burning it. If there is a law against waving Nigeria, which I don't know, again, let me just qualify that. If there is a law against carrying the flag of any other country in any context, then it will be against the law. But in my own, short of that, it's an expression. It is wrong. It is despicable. But you are not going to put somebody in jail for being despicable in their actions. It's like, for that, I'm not going to say per se, just waving a flag is illegal unless there's a law for it, which I'm not aware of. But more importantly, the people gave them the flag. Those kids know nothing. Somebody gave it to them, and those are the troublemakers, because there's no other good they can expect will come out from waving a flag, whether Russian, whether military. It is gaslighting. It is inviting violence. It is not in the context of the thing, and then it has this connotation of trying to invite the military, which is the worst thing Nigerian can ever do. Okay, the military are not a solution to our problem. I don't care how tough we are. We wait for the next election. I keep saying that. If you don't like the president, if you don't like what's going on, you wait for the next election. Yeah, you can protest, which even this government did, but inviting military is the worst thing. They've never done anything good for us. They're not going to do anything good for us, and anybody advocating it should be stamped down fast and quick, because they will set us back another 100 years. I want to be on record as saying that. I don't believe in that. Our democracy will find its way, and we are growing. And this is why I like protests against this government. You know why? Our president listens. Buhari doesn't listen. If you like, demonstrate for nothing forever. But because people went out to protest, Mr. President is responding. That's him. I know him. The man cannot help himself. He will respond to what the people are saying. He feels the people. So to that extent, this protest worked. But the violence part is unfortunate, and whoever is behind it, I think the security forces should be very hard, and they should prosecute them to the full extent of the law. That's my own position on this matter.
Let me bring in Mr. Adekoya back to the conversation. I mean, when you look at, people have talked about the geopolitics of this as well, you know, and I wanted to ask if you think that that's had any influence in this protest, geopolitics in terms of what's happening in neighboring Niger, when you also look at what's happening, especially in Niger, because it's the one that really shares a border with us. Do you think that that also had influence in whatever we saw play out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, geopolitics is everything. If you look at the nature of crisis and the interplay of interests, particularly in the diplomatic circle, it's all about different blocks of different ideology, different interests, seeking, positions against the other. If you look at the construct of our own geopolitical space in West Africa, you of course know what's happening with the Francophone countries, the resentments they feel towards the history they've had with colonial France, and their push for what they see as populist nationalism. You understand? So there's some of those sentiments there. The spark that the alliance, the Sahel alliance, have had in recent times with ECOWAS, that also comes and plays somewhere there. I said earlier that Kano in particular, Katsina, Sokoto, they border pretty much Niger Republic, and these are places, Katsina, you have people who share history. So there is some sharing of sentiment against what some see as Western influence and new colonialism. So there are some of those sentiments going on there. But what I want to really dimension is that we've come from a very tumultuous election cycle. We've not fully gone past the problems of the 2022 election cycle. So some of that is also playing out, because if you look at the way the protesters, some of them have conducted themselves, it will seem as though some group of people decided to protest without marshalling out their plan. We began to see their plan crystallize 1 week to the stated date of the protest. Now, you will also see that when the protest started, they began to morph their position and to crystallize it more formally. But what has happened is that in the build-up to the day of the protest, the government inadvertently had created a lot of momentum for these protests, giving oxygen to some influence operators within the polity to lash on to and to seek to pursue their own agenda or maybe create chaos. So there's local politics at play. There's geopolitical consideration. I don't think Russia will mind Nigeria fully joining BRICS. Africa is tilting towards alliance with the global south. The West still wants to hold on, of course, to their relationship with Nigeria. Russia is a player. China is a player. EU is a player. America is a player. And I'm sure that each of these parties will be looking now to see how this crisis pans out and how they can leverage whatever outcomes, local as it may be, in pursuit of their own interests. So it's all geopolitics also, if you ask me.
And you've raised a very key point, and I would take them on with you as we move to, when we move to the second part of the conversation, because this is one of the things that the Chief of Defense Staff here, General Christopher Musa, talked about during the ECOWAS meeting of, during the meeting of the ECOWAS Chiefs of Defense Staff. And I will raise that much later because it's very important. But I also want to talk about the issue of our porous borders, and some have really raised it, that perhaps, is one of the things that we should begin to focus on, because you're a security expert. I also want you to speak to that before I get back to Mr. Bao. in all of this, that people can come into the country through some of these borders and perhaps even participate in the protest or feed that protest without being checked? I also just wanted to speak on that.
There's no simple answer to that question. We have the, first we have the ECOWAS free movement protocol within the states within the region. Now we have the African Free Trade, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, now in force, being also given some local bite in terms of force of law. People would always move between borders. Remember that in some of these communities, historically, there were no borders. The then British administrative arrangement introduces borders. Our borders are quite porous. There's no quick fix to the border because sometimes it's just a compound between Nigeria's border and Niger's border, or that of Chad, or that of Cameroon. We have known immigration posts. They are known, they are unregistered, there are many footpaths into the country. It's a reality we have lived with for hundreds of years now, and I think we're pretty much fine with that. I think what we need to do a bit more differently is to improve collaboration between our neighbors, which is why some of us were clamoring for a diplomatic resolution with a spat with Niger. We didn't need that at all because if you look at in warfare, the nature of attritional warfare, whoever your friend is today may not always be your friend tomorrow. We don't want to have, for example, an incursion within the Atlantic Ocean approaching the Gulf of Guinea, and Nigeria doesn't have room to maneuver at its backyard. The backyard will be Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. So in terms of playing our politics, there's no way we'll have played a good politics without good neighborliness with our near neighbors in Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. So yes, while the borders are open, I don't think these are the real issues. And I don't think that the immigration or the police can completely address the issues of the borders if we're going to be factual. You have people from Niger who have Nigerian, they have NIN, they have driver's license, some of them have passports. We've lived amongst each other for a very long time. We've also intermarried. The problem is a bit hydra-headed and too complex to isolate and say that's just the immediate problem. I think there are other issues of how we play our politics. The fact that the subnational governments are not contributing their quota to effective local policing, to wit that the states don't have state police, and everybody seems to be over-relying on an overburdened, overstretched federal government to pick up the pieces and deal with issues like internal security. So structurally and quality-wise, the construct in Nigeria is not healthy. A case where we expect the president, commander-in-chief of the armed forces to be the person picking up the pieces at local communities at words, it's an overkill, it's an over-ask. So we are not structured correctly. And if we don't look at the real issues, we'll be dealing with the symptoms. People coming through the borders, porous borders, open infiltration of even data systems. Those are symptomatic displays of a deep-seated structural problem that we have. So yes, the borders are open, and yes, we can't quickly fix that immediately. But the space and the polity is not effectively being dominated by the infrastructure for security that we have. So there are a lot of pockets of spaces that are ungoverned and uncontrolled, where you have influence operators able to operate. I think that's the bigger issue, if you ask me. And
I want to take, because very important conversation you raised. In fact, I have to find a way of, finding a rope to hold you back from jumping ahead of me into the very next conversation, because you've raised a lot of points from that conversation. But I want to take the issue of the state governors who perhaps have not been at the forefront in addressing some of these issues. I want to bring in Mr. Kwebanwo here. I just wanted to respond to what Mr. Adekoya said. Because ahead of this protest, we saw that the federal government was taking the lead. And then even after the protest, you will see that the federal government also, is mopping up doing the cleanup exercise as well. I mean, speak to the state governor's dimension of this.
Well, to be honest with you, what I really think has happened here is breakdown and exposure of the northern governors incompetence in dealing with protests, not taking it as serious as they should have taken it, even though, like they say in my language, that a war that is declared in advance does not catch a leper or a cripple by surprise. This protest was announced. You can see the big difference in the results in the West, in the East, and in the North. It's not so much about whether the North is against the Tinubu government or not against the Tinubu government. It's because the Northern governors were not vigilant enough or took it serious enough to deploy security forces or to request the security forces to be adequately deployed. Those in the West were screaming, especially the government, the stakeholders. They were screaming, they were threatening, they were making it clear that you come to do violence, you're going to die. So that, to a large extent, I didn't like the threat of death or the threat of using local traditional forces to threaten them. But it worked to a large extent in the sense that people came out to protest. Because let's not forget, many of the people who led this protest are Yoruba people. They are Eastern people. There were not too many even Northerners that were visible in the organizing of the protest. But we didn't have so much damage in the West because the security forces were alert. The indigenes were alert. The stakeholders were alert. And people know you do violence, bad things will happen to you. And so we were able to contain it in the West and in the East. But the Northerners, maybe because they didn't experience the violent end of NSAS, they just didn't take it as serious as they should have. And that's what happened. So those who infiltrated the riots, they are always there. They're always waiting to embarrass the government, whatever government of the day it is. They're always willing to look for how to loot and how to steal. So they were able to operate more in the North because initially they didn't take it serious. They were not allowed to monitor those who are leading to also deploy. Look at what happened in Edo State. We saw the commissioner come out in full force with his policemen, not in a threatening manner. He addressed them, he befriended them, so they didn't do violence. In the West also. But in the North, the governors didn't come out. The governors didn't address their people. The governors did not make adequate attempts to make sure they guard against the infiltration that will happen, which always happens in any
Mr. Banwo, I have a minute before break, and I just wanted to ask you quickly how you think that the government should engage, especially on this issue going forward.
Yes, number one, I think the Mr. President should have addressed the nation before the protest. That will have dampened the thing. He waited too long to make the address. Number two, I think the governors need to take up their responsibilities more. The federal government cannot do everything. Mr. President, no matter how much we disagree with some of his policies, cannot do everything. The governors need to step up, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Yoruba or Igbo man that is there. They need to step up because when they were there, I'm talking about the Northerners now, they were more vigilant. People were in any scenario, let me just put it this way without opening the can of worms, the governors who are the primary governors of each state, they need to do more in terms of having rapport with their people, in terms of addressing their concerns before it goes out of hand. And the whole Almanjeri stuff is coming back to bite us right now because many of those youths, because they didn't take care of them when they were young, they didn't send them to school. Now they are easy to manipulate to go out and be leading riots and looting. So we need more from our state governments and local governments. We can't leave everything to the federal government. There's only so much they can do.
All right. Thank you both. Please stay with us. We will take a break now, and when we return, we'll move on to another conversation. We'll still be speaking with Oyekachi Adekoya, who is a defense consultant and CEO of Akolin Intelligence, and a U.S. lawyer and political affairs analyst. Okweban will stay with us, everyone.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world,
breaking down intricate economic and financial matters.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrencies.
We unveil and analyze complex policies of the CBN and other government parastatals as they affect your everyday life, keeping you a step ahead every time.
Okay. This is good. Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate facts from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
All right, thanks for staying with us. You are watching Standpoint. Let's now move to another conversation, which is also on security within the continent. Now, amidst clamor rather for military intervention in governance and demand for such during the End Bad Governance protest in Nigeria, the defense chiefs of member countries of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, met to curtail such agitations. At a meeting of the body on Wednesday, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, counselled Chiefs of Defense Staff of the West African sub-region to respect and uphold democracy in their countries for peace and stability of the continent. General Musa, who is the chairman of the Committee of ECOWAS Chiefs of Defense Staff, gave the counsel at the opening of the meeting of Chiefs of Defense Staff of ECOWAS in Abuja. He said the call became necessary as change of government by undemocratic means would have unintended consequences and threaten democratic values in the sub-region. I'll continue our conversation with the defense consultant and CEO of Aquilin Intelligence, Onyekachi Adekoya, and U.S. lawyer and political affairs analyst, Dr. Okwebawo. Thank you both for staying with us. Again, let me start with you, Mr. Adekoya. One of the things that was said in that meeting that I found really concerning was the issue of, competition and proxy wars in the sub-region. I just want to get your thoughts on that, exactly what is the competition and the proxy wars. Explain to us in terms of, all it entails and the security implication of it.
Okay, I think we may not have enough time for geopology really this afternoon, but we'll keep it as simple as we can. If you look at Niger, for example, the U.S. has finally moved its last set of forces from Al-Ghad's base in Niger. You now have a Sahel alliance and a sweep of the Central African Republic area from Francophone influence to Russian influence. And some of those actions and influence is also going upwards towards East and Northern Africa. If you look at Sudan, Algeria, and even the influences even in Western Asia, what you call the Middle East. And then you also look at Southern African region. So there's this big speak about the eventual scramble for Africa, which will happen after the pivot towards Asia is completed. The pivot towards Asia is the West's strategy to contain China's influence within the South China Sea and that axis. It's the geopolitical space of the world is like a chessboard. Different pieces are moving at different times, and you have opposing forces, or what we like to call great power politics, which is at play. So in any sphere of influence or interest, where any of these great powers can gain one over the other, they are very much interested in pushing their weight around. Why I don't think that this Russian flag thing is a Russian influence operation is because it doesn't fit with the MO, the modus operandi of the Russian state. The Russian state in their own modus operandi seems to take a more militaristic alliance approach to the way they play down geopolitics. You've had cases of Russians supporting ANC against apartheid regime, supporting some African countries against the colonialists. At the time, most of African countries were agitating for independence. But we've seen a Russian state also support a Baal al-Assad in Syria and take some of their own stance in which they think fits their own interests. But at no time have we seen a Russia anti-democratic influence operation. They are almost, military speaking, opportunistic in their approach to some of these things. So if a coup is afoot and then a new administration comes in place and needs military alliance, then Russia may do their calculations and provide alliance. So, I mean, that plays out for you the different great powers that have interest in Africa. You look at France, the UK, you look at the US, you look at the EU. But of these different categories of influence operators, as it were, the UK is diminishing in its interest and influence in Africa. Remembering that the UK colonized most part of the world, even America. We have to take some time to look at how the UK's influence from a once imperialistic state to what is now isolated just within the United Kingdom, not even bearing so much influence in Europe. You may need some time to dimension that and how that
but
America...
If I may quickly just come in, Mr. Dikoya, apologies again for butting in. Let me just first start by saying that Russia has since denied playing any role in what we saw in those footages. But, you know, I also wanted to ask you the implication all of this power tussle in the continent, especially in the ECOWAS region, has on our security.
Well, it has great implication, really. It has very great implication. I mean, for Nigeria in particular, Nigeria is also what you consider a strategic, as it were, impediment to the interests of imperialists in Africa. There was a time when Nigeria had force in ECOMOG and could, you know, play its weight around in the West African space and even in Africa. You know, Nigeria was a force, it was a power. There was a time the Western government alliance wanted to set up the AFRICOM base. Certain countries like Nigeria, Libya, South Africa, Morocco, Algeria were strongly opposed to that base. You know, but you can fast forward, it's almost 15, 20 years later. Libya is in a bad shape. Nigeria is not in a good shape. South Africa is not in any good shape. You had the Arab Spring. So geopolitics has great implication for local security. That's why it's a delicate dance for the Foreign Affairs Ministry, for the president. You can look at India, for example. Nigeria says it takes a non-alignist, Afrocentric international policy approach. How are we playing this? We seem to be leaning too much towards one side. We are not playing all sides to our own advantage, as it were. And that puts us in a bit of a bind. We don't want to play too much to one side to our own detriment. You know, so that has implication. That's why we're not getting some fighting equipment, because each party is suspecting. We're not sure where alliances lie. There are some things that we need, even to expand our oil infrastructure. Funding has somewhat been dried up, barring when the Russia-Ukraine issue happened. So there are a number of issues that geopolitically impacts on our currency, impacts on our macroeconomy, impacts on our national security, and it's a very sensitive area where the NIA, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and the President must dance a very delicate dance in balancing our interests in the world, in Africa, and in the sub-region.
Well, let me bring in Dr. Kpe. Dr. Kpe, I mean, the battle, you know, I think there is a book like that, or was it a journal? Like, I think it was a book, The Battle for the Heart of Africa. I mean, when you look at that statement coming from the Chiefs of Defense Staff, talking about the Africa becoming an arena for power and competition, I mean, when you think of it, what picture do you get, and the implication of it for Africa, and then leadership in Africa, how we should be responding to it?
Well, I typically stay in my own area of competence. I'm not big on this global geopolitics stuff, but one thing is clear, so I would defer to Mr. Dikoya and all of that. But one thing is clear, everybody knows that Africa goes, the way Nigeria goes is the way Africa goes. We are the biggest, we are the most powerful, we are the most endowed, we are the most in everything. And every world power know that. So everybody's interested in what happens in Nigeria, and everybody would like to take advantage of whatever is going on here. So Mr. Dikoya is right on that. But I think we are not mentioning the names of people that could be involved in these northern things. I don't think it's the Russians. We should be looking at people in the Middle East. We should be looking at Syria. There we should be looking at those Muslim fundamentalists. They are the ones that have been active, that we know for a fact. They are the ones that have been involved with Boko Haram. They are the ones that have been involved in Sambisa Forest. They are the ones that have been involved in every uprising or every terrorist stuff that we see in the north. It is always traced back to the Middle East and all those countries there. why is nobody talking about them? Russia has never really shown any interest in Africa, so in Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge. So why are we fixating on that? So I agree. Everybody is interested in Nigeria. UK is, US is, and like Mr. Adekoya says, I'm not a foreign policy person. I don't consider that my strength. But strategically, if I'm thinking, you have to stay one place. You can't be a Switzerland in this 2024. You have to decide who you are with and then maximize it. You can't play one against the other. You're just going to get hurt at this point of the game. If you want to be totally neutral, then stay away. You don't get benefit from anybody. But if you want to play, then play to the best of what is in your own interest, is the way I would see it. But I agree, I'm not a foreign affairs specialist. I don't dabble in things I don't know much about. But I just don't like the fact that we are not pinpointing those who could be possibly involved in this. We've seen the countries that are involved in the northern side. Why is nobody mentioning them? We're talking Russia. Please. So for me, it's a loud call to Nigerians to get this act together, because any crack in our walls, these superpowers, they are ready to jump in, including China, that is pretending like they don't care. They are all looking for opportunity to take advantage of whatever happens in Nigeria. That's why we cannot allow it. That's why we should not allow it. But let's not be looking at a country that may not even necessarily be interested in what is going on here just yet. Like Mr. Adekoya said, they are opportunistic. We know that's what they are. When the opportunities come that a Putin can take advantage of, he will. But does he care about us really? It does not. Those who care about us, they are in the Middle East. They are the ones who wants to come and foment trouble here. We know them. We've seen them. So to me, that's the way I see it. Nigeria needs.
I'm not sure that Dr. I'm not sure it's just a particular region, that cares about Nigeria. I'm sure that every continent has, because of the mineral resources in this country and in this continent.
Yes.
There are lots of countries that are interested, a lot of regions interested in the continent. But I wanted to also ask about this, and I know you've been following. You say you are not a foreign affairs expert, but you're making very good points. I also wanted to ask you about the idea, because one of the things that General Musa talked about was that there are ongoing conversations, to ensure that Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are returned to ECOWAS. I mean, as you follow through that situation, are you optimistic that, these three countries who have now formed their own alliance are going to return to ECOWAS?
They probably will have to. They are not really strong countries. They can't really go it alone. In my own opinion, they are making their point, and you also have to understand that military is not necessarily, they are military guys, they are illegitimate governments by any standard of law. So they are not likely to be listening to what our own president has to say, especially considering his record of actually trying to prevent them from seizing power. But they have to. Niger cannot stand on his own. Niger needs Nigeria. Niger needs West Africa. So the pressure for them to return back to civilian regime should be mounted up. I've never believed in military regime. I don't think they're going to do any good for anybody. So ultimately, they will have to. They cannot, the few of them that have formed alliance, what can they do? What resources do they have? They can't go it alone. At some point, if the rest of ECOWAS decide to actually treat them as pariahs, where they don't want to deal with them, they're going to be in dire states. But so that could be part of what we used to negotiate with them. I don't think we should declare them pariahs, but at the same time, I don't think we should dabble in their own affairs either. We don't want anybody coming to our own country to dabble in our affairs. So, Mr. President and our own Nigerian people, there's a limit to which they should get involved in the affairs of Niger or any of those countries. They are sorting out their own affairs in their own way. All we can do is continue to push at the acceptable level for democratic rule to be returned, but we should not get involved in their internal affairs. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. We can't be saying we want to put our nose, we want to invade Niger, or we want to do anything. I'm not saying we are doing that, but there are rumors at one point where there was a lot of noise that they want to go on. Why do we want to do that? Is their country. They like military rule. Let them keep it. That's what they want. So same way, we want civilian government. We don't want military. We will protest against our government if we don't like it. So let nobody put their nose. Just like we also should not put nose in anybody. But to answer your question directly, I think they should come back to ECOWAS. I think they will come back because I don't see them being able to sustain themselves in an isolationist policy, especially if the rest of the countries, including Nigeria, decide to treat them the way they are treating themselves, that, okay, you want to be alone, then be alone, and then they cut them off and don't trade with them. They can't survive that. So ultimately, it will all be resolved out. We just need to be careful to the extent that we also put nose in their affairs. That will be my own humble opinion. Nigeria has too much problem for us to be focusing on anybody right now. Mr. President should focus 99% of his energy on Nigeria when we are okay. Yeah, that's the reason why they say in a plane, when there's turbulence and the mask falls down, that you should put the one in your nose first before you put on your child. You got to take care of your problem before you start taking care of Niger, Mali, all those places. Forget them for now. Let Mr. President get us food. Let him get us employment. Let him get us better security. When we are okay, then we can start looking for who is not well in Niger or who is not whatever. You know, we show up our borders to make sure they don't bring their problems here. But like Mr. Adekoya said, we are signatories to a treaty that allows for freedom of movement. So there's a challenge in that. But for me, I think Nigeria at this point of our existence should not be worrying too much about international politics.
Let me take that part of the conversation to Mr. Adekoya. Because one of the things that is being talked about is the implication of this country, or the potential risk of this country is not returning to ECOWAS. Speak to us about how necessary their return is to defeating insurgency in the region.
You've asked a very, very, very important question. And like my colleague has said, eventually I suspect that these countries will have to come back into the fold. The U.S. has what it calls the Monroe Doctrine, which says that anything within the space of the Western Hemisphere affects and can impact on America's national security interest. While I agree that we may want to focus on ourselves first and solve our own problem, that is somewhat of an isolationist disposition, which presumes that if you focus on yourself, problems will not come from outside to meet you. The world is not a global village. Contextually, problems in your near neighbors can quickly snowball and become your own problem. Africa needs a strong Nigeria. The sub-Saharan African space needs a strong Nigeria. The Sahelian region needs a strong Nigeria. So yes, Nigeria should look inward, solve its own problem first, and begin to project power out more effectively. We have to do it. We are now in a geopolitical space where might is right. And Nigeria as a force, the largest black nation on earth, does not have the military-industrial complex to support or project national interests and defend it. So we are porous, and that's why you see that we are very porous, is that we don't have the systems, we don't have the equipment, we don't have the resources to protect our territorial integrity, to pursue our interests in any part of Africa as we see fit, as great powers should do. So these things have great impact on our national security. And I would love to see a rework of our national security strategy document. I think the one we have now should be due for a review, something that was focusing more on human security, meaning that we are looking inwards again. We must redefine how we play in Africa. Even in this conflict and spat with Niger, Nigeria took a position in ECOWAS. The AU took another position contrary to our position, showing you how far below the pecking order we may have dropped. So, I mean, it's a very important question you have raised, that what is the impact on national security? It impacts our national security in so many ways. It impacts food security if our food systems are constantly being threatened through incursions from the northeast, the northwest, even down south. A country that cannot feed itself is a country that will run into crisis. What is the height of the end bad government crisis? It's food inflation. What is fueling food inflation? We have a supply side crisis. Farmers cannot go to their farms. And in the midst of all these climatic conditions and the rest, our population is projected to outgrow that of the United States by the year 2050. So food is dwindling, oil production is dwindling, but population is exploding. You know, food should be the cheapest thing. Transportation, energy is expensive abroad. Everything is expensive, but food and transport is reasonably cheap. So we have I call it an attritional warfare on our hand, because what is confronting us is a serious impairment to our food security as a country. The places you have the herders-farmer clashes, the armed bandits attack, the Boko Haram ISWAP, Mansaru clashes and all that are within our food belts. That's why we don't have yam. You understand the implications for national security. So a country that cannot feed itself, what security are we talking about? So we don't have the systems, we don't have the equipment, we don't even have the food, as it were. You know, so there are bigger issues, and you know, Nigeria needs some form of stability within its near neighbors to be able to heal itself and go forward. So I think we need to take a cue from the southeastern part of this country, you know, where the southeast decided to sit out this protest. We must sit out the conflict with our neighbors at this time. We are very vulnerable. We have bigger fishes.
Of what they are doing, and I think the people have spoken. They protested for 9 days, and I think the government has enough in terms of if they want to know what the people want. They know right now. They just need to go out there and do it. That's 20 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing less than 30 seconds. Thank you, gentlemen. A U.S.-based lawyer and political affairs analyst, Dr. Bebanwo, and defense consultant and CEO of Aquilin Intelligence, Mr. Oyekachi Adekoya. Both of you are not new to the house, so always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, that's Standpoint this week. Remember, you can watch the repeat broadcast at 11 p.m. tonight and 5 a.m. on Sunday. Thank you for watching. I am Precious Amayu.